Hello, everybody. Luis Morena Ocampo's hastily produced report titled Expert Opinion, Genocide Against Armenians in 2023, in addition to being replete with factual errors, omissions and misleading arguments, peppered with irrelevant references, is nothing but a lousy compilation by a man in a hurry, commissioned to reach a predetermined result. This is a conclusion I have reached upon careful examination of the work of the Argentine lawyer and former chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, ICC. Firstly, I will explain how I've reached this conclusion. Secondly, I will try to understand why Ocampo has produced such an ill-conceived opinion. Apologies in advance, today I will speak a bit longer than I normally do. There's much ground to cover, and alas, it can't be helped. So let us crack on. In his opinion, Ocampo purportedly looks into the question as to whether what he calls the blockade of the Lachin corridor by the Azerbaijani security forces, impeding access to any food, medical supplies and other essentials, should be considered a genocide under Article 2, Paragraph C of the Convention on Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. In other words, the question the author looks at is if some of the measures taken by Azerbaijan regarding the Lachin Road could amount to an act of deliberately inflicting on Karabakh Armenians conditions of life calculated to bring about their physical destruction, in whole or in part. On the 31st of July, Ocampo shared a post on Twitter stating that, at the request of the president of Artsakh, I will produce in 7 days a report to stop Armenian genocide in Artsakh. What does this post tell you? First of all, its terminology indicates that Ocampo, despite being a lawyer, is a man driven by a definite bias, for he refers to Araik Harutyunyan, who is the head of the illegitimate and unrecognized creation, self-styled as NKR, as the head of Artsakh, attributing legitimacy to this entity. It also tells you, indeed in the clearest possible way, that the author had already reached his conclusion before considering the subject in its full entirety and being able to acquaint himself with a balanced range of pertinent facts. It is self-evident that Ocampo was not commissioned to produce an objective legal opinion, but that which his client wanted to hear. There's also an ethical question here. Whatever may have been expected of the author by Harutyunyan or whoever paid for Ocampo's services, the latter was duty-bound to advise faithfully without pandering to his clients or his own prejudices. A legal opinion must be objective, not subjective, and based on the relevant law and the application of the law to the facts. So let us consider Ocampo's report in its full entirety. The author argues that there is a reasonable basis to believe that a genocide is being committed against Karabakh Armenians in 2023. In order to establish President Aliyev's genocidal intent, he refers to 3 points, which he describes as facts. Firstly, the Argentine lawyer argues that President Aliyev deliberately blocked the provision of life's essentials to Karabakh Armenians. Ocampo further states that since 12th of December 2022, Azerbaijan has been implementing the blockade of the Lachin corridor. Without going into the details that the eco-protest on the Lachin Khan Kandu raid was a perfectly legitimate civil society act, let us deal with the gist of what the author tries to substantiate. During the period of the environmental action from the 12th of December 2022 to late April 2023, the cars belonging to the so-called Russian peacekeeping contingent and the RCRC, International Committee of the Red Cross, moved freely in both directions along the Lachin Road, ensuring that the essential needs of Karabakh Armenians were met. After Azerbaijan established a border checkpoint at the entrance to the Lachin Road on the 23rd of April, for almost 2 months the route was fully functional, with Armenian residents of Karabakh able to pass using their private vehicles. On the 15th of June, after an Armenian military serviceman fired at Azerbaijani soldiers during a flag-raising ceremony at the Azerbaijani border checkpoint, Baku temporarily suspended movement along the road, which was resumed imminently to facilitate the transfer of those in need of medical assistance and medical deliveries. Another suspension of movement was enacted on the 11th of July when it was revealed by the Azerbaijani Border Service that attempts had been made to smuggle unauthorized goods via vehicles displaying the emblem of the RCRC. It is worth remembering that at no point has any temporary suspension of movement along the Lachun Road had any significant bearing on the transfer of Karabakh Armenians for medical purposes. Ocampo's examination of the period succeeding 12th of December 2022 does not just fail to provide a fair account of how the movement along the route has been conducted, but it also omits the fact that Azerbaijan and Armenia agreed on the principle of complementarity between the Lachun and Aghdam-Khankandi roads on the 15th of July, and that Baku has repeatedly offered to send humanitarian trucks via its own territory. Ocampo is of course conscious of the fact that no one has been killed amongst the Karabakh Armenians since December 2022. In trying to attribute a genocidal content to the situation and establish material elements of the crime, he opines that denying Karabakh Armenians the elementary means of existence is omnipresent and that Azerbaijan is subjecting them to conditions calculated to bring about their physical destruction, and later the physical destruction itself. A glaring omission from Ocampo's evaluation is that he does not deal with the question as to how reasonable it would be to believe that, whilst doing its level best to ensure safe and unimpeded humanitarian supply deliveries from Aghdam, Baku could be suspected of having the intention of committing a genocide. Secondly, Ocampo makes a complete pig's breakfast of citing the orders of the International Court of Justice, ICJ, and Article 6 of the 10 November 2020 tripartite statement to propound his blockade argument in the vain hope of proving that Baku disobeys the ruling and violates the relevant provisions of the ceasefire declaration. On the 6th of July, the ICJ ruled that Azerbaijan should take all measures at its disposal to ensure unimpeded movement of persons, vehicles and cargo along the Lachun route in both directions. There is nothing in the wording of the ICJ order to suggest that the establishment of a border checkpoint by Azerbaijan was illegal, which, according to Ocampo, cemented the blockade. What the decision says is that Baku should take all measures at its disposal to ensure unimpeded movement, which Baku does, but subject to security considerations. The movement therein is as unimpeded as possible. And since Azerbaijan is obligated by Article 6 to provide a security guarantee regarding the Lachun road, it should also take all measures to ensure that passage is safe. And thirdly, Ocampo argues that despite the ICJ order putting President Aliyev on notice about the real and imminent risk to the health and life of Karabakh Armenians, Azerbaijani president has willfully refused to execute the ICJ's orders. What the author tries to vainly do is to connect some of the expressions entailed in the wording of the order in question with Article 2 and paragraph C of the Genocide Convention in order to prove that ICJ confirmed the occurrence of the material elements of the crime. Again, Ocampo, in addition to willfully missing the nitty-gritty and vitally pertinent details related to how the movement along the Lachun road has been conducted over the past 8 months, fails to acknowledge that by offering a safe and reliable alternative route via Aghdam, Azerbaijan is in fact making colossal attempts to remove any danger to the Armenian residents of Karabakh. Ocampo's reasoning is grounded on finding some out-of-context elements on a cherry-picking basis to mold his own preconceived conclusion. After all, that is what he was asked and paid to do. The opinion is full of nonsense designed to establish genocidal intent, which is a subjective element of the crime, by means of attributing non-existing meanings to President Aliyev's statements. Furthermore, Ocampo's grasp of the 10 November 2020 tripartite statement leaves much to be desired. He mistakenly argues that by allowing the so-called Russian peacekeepers to be temporarily stationed in Karabakh, and in the context of Article 6 of the ceasefire deal, Azerbaijan implicitly recognized the Nagorno-Karabakh Republic's factual autonomy. Firstly, Azerbaijan does not recognize anything called NKR, let alone its autonomy. Secondly, Ocampo should also be reminded that on the 10th of November 2020, during the televised speech when the tripartite declaration was signed, President Aliyev declared that the status is gone to hell, effectively proclaiming the conflict's end. For the peace process preceding the war of 2020 had been centered around the status of the former Nagorno-Karabakh Autonomous Oblast, which has now been consigned to the dustbin of history. Enough of the report. Let us look into the man's motives. We understand that he has previously visited Armenia twice, and as an Argentinian, could reasonably be expected to be on cordial terms with the Armenian diaspora in the country, in his country and beyond, which in all probability paid for his services. There's nothing incriminating here, yet. We need to look into the man's character based on his deeds to see what could have induced or driven his ill-conceived legal opinion. In a tweet, presidential aide Hikmet Hacıyev, in addition to criticizing Ocampo's report for its myriad factual, legal and substantive errors, to which I've already referred in detail, questioned the man's integrity. Hacıyev stated that Ocampo managed companies based in some of the most notorious tax havens while serving as chief prosecutor at the ICC, adding that Argentine lawyer had a client suspected of war crimes in Libya. Indeed, all of these are very relevant to understanding Ocampo's predilections. In 2017, the documents obtained by Mediapart and analyzed by European Investigative Collaborations Organization revealed that our hero owned offshore companies registered in two of the most impenetrable tax havens in the world, Panama and the British Virgin Islands. When challenged about this, Ocampo replied with remarkable honesty, stating that his salary at the ICC was not enough. But not a good excuse and not a legally kosher one, but still. As a prosecutor at the ICC, Ocampo was obligated not to engage in any activity which was likely to interfere with his functions or to affect confidence in his independence. He was also required not to engage in other occupations of a professional nature. It seems clear that the fact of Ocampo's owning of offshore businesses in a tax haven was incompatible with his role at the ICC. Indeed, Neil Watson, the British journalist, aptly described him as a gamekeeper turned poacher. Der Spiegel, a German newspaper media, in collaboration with Mediapart and EIC, on the basis of tens of thousands of previously unknown documents, including internal documents of the ICC, contracts, diplomatic dispatches, bank records and emails, gave a character definition of Ocampo as a man who is compliant, craves attention, accepts conflicts of interest, and apparently has a problem with money, despite fancying himself as a self-avowed champion for transparency. What is particularly striking is that Ocampo was to be paid $3 million to advise Hassan Tatanaki, a dubious oil billionaire linked with the Gaddafi regime. The Argentine lawyer also used insider information to protect his client from possible prosecution by the ICC. In 2017, at the height of the scandal, Der Spiegel met Ocampo in London and found that the former ICC prosecutor was a man who liked to talk about his projects and successes and was adverse to answering critical questions. Well, apart from this, there was also an internal criticism levied against him from the Hague-based ICC itself. It was said that he had trouble concluding his cases in ways that were legally watertight, relying on anonymous witnesses. German international law expert Hans-Peter Kaul, who served as a judge in The Hague for many years, said that Ocampo presented the court with problematic witnesses who had nothing to contribute, with the prosecutor's legal argumentation being tenuous and his style of running his department being akin to an Argentine land baron. Very interesting indeed. He also failed, the Ocampo failed the most important case of his ICC career. When on the 26th of February 2011, the United Nations Security Council assigned him the task of investigating war crimes in Libya, Ocampo missed an opportunity to conduct an on-site investigation to obtain forensic and documentary evidence. When pressed by his colleagues, he replied that the evidence provided by other third parties, in other words, the evidence provided by journalists and defectors, would suffice. Der Spiegel concluded that high-profile appearances on the world stage were apparently more important for him than detailed forensic work and the arduous collection and examination of evidence. On a different note, in 2017, during the trial in Madrid concerning a money laundering case involving the Tambovskaya and Malashevskaya gang and high-profile Russian public figures, including Vladimir Reznik, an MP from the United Russia Party, from the ruling party of Russia, he was called by the defense as a witness. The striking point is that the former ICC prosecutor, in the capacity of a witness, appeared to know that Russian authorities had refused to open a criminal investigation against Reznik. The information was not in the public domain and was not supposed to be imparted to Ocampo as a witness. But he knew. How? I suppose one does not need the abilities of Sherlock Holmes to reach the right conclusions. All of these reveal two critical points about Ocampo, namely, his failure as a lawyer to be attentive to details and conduct proper investigations, avoiding conflicts of interest on one side, and his love for money impinging upon his integrity on the other. And this is a man who, in 7 days, produced an ill-conceived and slanted legal opinion titled Armenian Genocide in 2023. Perhaps there is nothing surprising here. Thank you very much.